One of the many things that people do not know is that Tanganyika was at one time a province of the Republic of the DRC. In this particular episode, I'm your host Gola, and this is the Civic Lens. We walk you through the phases that Tanzania has gone through prior to its inception on the 26th of April 1964, and even the phases that it has gone through after its inception on that date. The reason we're doing this is to trace back the silent voices, the voices that have been kept quiet over all this time, the demons that lie down in history, and the ghosts of Tanzania that have only found a chance to resurface with the Gen Z revolution in 2025. So let's start from the beginning. But if you're joining the Civic Lens for the first time, please hit the subscribe button. Now, if you want to understand the history of Tanzania, it would be wrong if we started with the 26th of April 1964. However, this is the very date when the independent state of Zanzibar and Tanganyika as an independent state merged together to form the United Republic of Tanzania. And it was to take 6 months later, up to October of that very year, for the name to be changed from the United Republic of Tanganyika to the Republic of Tanzania. So to understand the politics of Tanzania, let us date it way back prior to this date. And our dates might find meaning in the late 1880s. The reason why we are picking the late 1880s is because Tanganyika has a different history from Zanzibar. And we will start by detailing the history of Tanganyika independently, and then we will come back to Zanzibar to understand the history of silent voices and violence in the current Republic of Tanzania. Now, Tanganyika, which was previously a province of the Democratic Republic of Congo, gets handed over to the German rule prior to the First World War. And so the German rule in Tanganyika at this time was very brutal and direct. What do I mean? The Germans were using Germans to administer their rules upon Africans. This was different from most of other Western powers that were using Africans to assert their authority upon Africans. So the German rule in Tanganyika then was very, very brutal. And then we witnessed World War I between the period of 1914 to the period of 1918. And after World War I, there is the formation of the League of Nations. And when the League of Nations is performed, something happens. Germany is punished. So at this point, it is important to explain why Germany is being punished in 1919 as part of the history of the silent voices that have been hushed in Tanganyika then and in the current state of Tanzania. The war that occurs between 1914 and 1918 is as a result of the assassination of the Prince of Serbia in the street of Sarajevo in Austria. So by the end of the war in 1918, Germany is being blamed for being the country that pioneered the occurrence of the First World War. And history details it that it is this blame after the First World War which perhaps led to the rise of the Second World War because of the bitterness that was in Germany. However, the story of the First World War and the Second World War might not be the subject of our discussion today. So Germany is being punished, and one of the categories or one of the conditions that the League of Nations gives Germany in 1980 includes: number one, reduce the size of your army, and number two, surrender some of your colonies abroad. So Tanganyika then finds itself under the second condition that the League of Nations put upon Germany as one of the colonies that now have to be surrendered to other Western powers. Which Western power gets to take Tanganyika? So this conversation goes on because Tanganyika was previously a province of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Belgians at that time feel that they want to repossess Tanganyika as part of the Congo that is under their control. But the British has asserted their control in Zanzibar, in Uganda, and in Kenya. And they feel that the East African British, the Ibiako Company, the East African British Company at this time, is fit enough to manage the affairs of Tanganyika. So the League of Nations mandate hands over Tanganyika to the British powers. And this now becomes the second time, or rather this becomes the second time that Tanganyika changes position from the hand of one Western power to the hand of another Western power. they have not achieved any form of independence. They have only undergone a transfer of power possession because of the end of World War I. But with the British ruling, which unlike the German rule, which was direct in nature, the British enforces an indirect rule in Tanganyika. And this now gives particular room for certain Africans to be involved in the activities of running the affairs of the Africans in Tanganyika. This leads us to 1929, when the Tanganyika African Association is formed. So the Tanganyika African Association is formed in 1929 to become one of the vehicles that champions for reforms or for the rights of the African people in the then British Tanganyika. And it survives up to 1954, when now it changes from Tanganyika African Association TAR to the Tanganyika African National Union. So Tanganyika African National Union under Julius Nyerere becomes the party that fast forward in 1961 hands over independence to the Republic of Tanganyika. So Julius Nyerere becomes the first prime minister under the Tanganyika African National Union, and later on becomes the first president under the Tanganyika African National Union. In Zanzibar, it's very interesting. The same thing that has happened in Tanganyika is happening in Zanzibar, but at a different spectrum. In Zanzibar, the first people to possess the Republic of Zanzibar then, which really was not a republic for quite some time, and we will detail later, but the first Western powers to possess Zanzibar are the British powers. And from the British powers possessing Zanzibar, Zanzibar obtains independence from the British powers in 1963. But the independence is not given to the ordinary Africans in Zanzibar. No, the independence is given to the Sultanate, the Arab Sultan of Zanzibar. So here again we put a pause. Before we merge Zanzibar and Tanganyika, let us understand the dynamic of this Arab Sultan. You remember there is something previously talked about in Newsbites called the 16 miles coastal strip. This story of the 16 miles coastal strip, which sometimes include Mombasa, is one of the basis of the conversations of Pwani Sea, Kenya, because this particular coastal strip belonged to the Sultan of Zanzibar. And so when power came from the British people to the people of Zanzibar, it did not fall among the Africans of Zanzibar at that time. It was handed over to this very Sultan, who also owned the 16 miles coastal strip of the Kenyan coast. So that well explained. Let's go back to Zanzibar. After the power is handed over to this Sultan in 1963, a revolution erupts in Zanzibar. And this revolution that erupts in Zanzibar leads to now the power being handed over from the Arab Sultanate to the people of Zanzibar. Now we are at 1963. But let me take you back to 1905. Something happens in Tanganyika. As the German rule gets very rough upon the Tanganyika people, an individual called Kenjeketile Ngwale introduces a myth to the Tanganyika people and tells them that there is a certain water that Kenjeketile Ngwale offers that would cover an individual from the German bullets. And for a period of 1905 to 1907, the Tanganyika citizens then believes this myth so much that they use it as a basis to resist the German rule then. Of course, after 2 years, they realized that this water could not cover them from the German bullets, and the Maji rebellion under Kenjeketile Ngwale fell. Now let's come back to 1963. At 1963, Zanzibar has found its independence on the African people ground. Tanganyika as well has also found its independence on the African people ground. So something happens on the 26th of April 1964. The two states, that is Zanzibar and Tanganyika, merges to form the United Republic of Tanganyika and Zanzibar. And 6 months later, on the 10th of October 1964, the United Republic of Tanganyika and Zanzibar is renamed to be called the United Republic of Tanzania. Here is where now we meet the political beginnings of a republic that is as a result of a merger of two states that have independent histories of violence from two different Western powers and an Arab state. So let us look at Tanzania from that dynamic. Zanzibar have their own history of violence and revolution. Tanganyika have their own history of Majimaji rebellion suffering between the hands of two Western powers, but they have merged to form one government. Now, the party that leads Zanzibar to independence is called the Afro-Shirazi Party, and a gentleman called Abid Karume. Abid Karume then becomes the first president of Zanzibar in 1963, but with the merger of 1964, 26th April, the overall president of the Republic of Tanzania is Julius Kambarage Nyerere. Now, in 1965, like most other African countries, an African country's ideology, whether it is their economic ideology, whether it's capitalism or communism, or whether it's their political space being democratic or militant, is always based on the founding father of that state. Kenya, for example, we might say that the stability of our country was as a result of the fact that our founding father was a Mau Mau fighter, but we could also blame our capitalistic mindset with our economy to him. If you look at Uganda, you can blame the military state to the first coup that occurred in the Obote government, where Idi Amin had to overthrow Obote before Obote finished his term. So Uganda incepted itself with violence from the military. If you look at Tanzania, which is the subject of our discussion today, you'd realize that ujamaa policy, kuongea Kiswahili na kujitegemea can all be traced back to Julius Kambarage Nyerere. So let's go back to 1965. The famous Arusha Declaration happens, and in the Arusha Declaration, Nyerere talks of three key things. The first being the ujamaa policy. Nyerere tells the people that now let's champion equality and let's subdue individuality with community. And then Nyerere talks about kujitegemea. He tells the Tanzanian people to depend on their own resources to develop themselves. And then Nyerere introduces Swahili as a very household language to separate the Tanzanian nationals and the Zanzibar nationals from the rest of the other powers, being the British, the German, and of course the Arabs, which partially also spoke Swahili. So these three grounds forms what is known as the Arusha Declaration, and when they are pronounced, they become the grounding foundational seeds upon which Tanzania builds. But the question is this at this point: is everyone comfortable with adopting a socialist idea in Tanzania this time? Number one. Is everyone comfortable with kujitegemea while the external powers, with the Western powers, still have interest in Tanzania? It seems at this point that all these silent voices that did not agree with Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere were silenced. And so Tanzania looked like one cohesive body agreeing behind one individual, while the layer, if you went underneath, portrayed individuals who are dissatisfied with the position that Nyerere took. Now, 13 years later, since inception, because in 1967, of course, and this is a very important part of history, in 1977, all these parties, individual parties, being TANU and ASP, Afro-Shirazi Party of Zanzibar, and TANU of Tanganyika, forms one single party called the Chama cha Mapinduzi. This happens after, for a long time, a period of 13 years, in both Zanzibar and Tanganyika, there was single party state. So Chama cha Mapinduzi is formed. And when Chama cha Mapinduzi is formed, it becomes the dominant party, a single party. Tanzania and Tanganyika, or Tanganyika and Zanzibar under the Republic of Tanzania, becomes a single party state after the formation of Chama cha Mapinduzi CCM. This party leads the people of Tanzania until 1985, when Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere finally now decides to step down. He is replaced by Mwinyi, and when President Mwinyi takes over after 1985, you could see the echoes of the silent voices that for this long period of independence have since been silenced. And one way that Mwinyi portrays the voice of these silenced voices is channeling the direction of multipartism from the single party state that the Republic of Tanzania has been known for. And so in 1992, while most of the East African countries are still struggling with single party state in their system, Tanzania's new president then had introduced a multi-party state. And in 1992, after the introduction of multi-party state in Tanzania, specifically on the 28th May of that year, two opposition parties come to life. One of them is the CFU, the Civic Front Union of Tanzania, and the other one is the Chadema, that is the Chama cha Maendeleo and Demokrasia ya Tanzania. So these two particular parties come as the leading opposition parties of Tanzania, but the dominant party still remains CCM. Mwinyi tries with these reforms until 1995, when now he is handing it over to Mkapa. And Mkapa takes it from Mwinyi, runs it for a period of time before giving it to Kikwete. Kikwete runs it for quite some time before giving it to Magufuli. And it is in Magufuli's time that we meet the new face that has now given life to all these silent voices that for a long time have been tamed both in Zanzibar and in Tanganyika. Now, what happens in 2020? An election is held in Tanzania, and when this election is held, observers are saying that this election is so unfair. It is so unfair that Magufuli is in a move to destroy everyone from the opposition and lead, but they win. The reason they win is because Chama cha Mapinduzi is where all the elite politicians of Tanzania are in. They understand that you cannot get power in the Republic of Tanzania until now without being affiliated to Chama cha Mapinduzi. So all the political elites of Tanzania join this party, and the effect of this is a lot. First being this: when all the elites of a political party come together, be rest assured that they will not agree. So there will be silent voices, there will be backstabbing, there will be sabotaging policies, and this is what Chama cha Mapinduzi is known for. After they deliver a win for President John Pombe Magufuli, the silent voices in the party start to attack John Pombe Magufuli. And some envoys, including Honorable Pole Pole, has even revealed that the death of John Pombe Magufuli might not have been the documented COVID-19, but might be affiliated to the infights within the Chama cha Mapinduzi for control. So Magufuli exits the scene in 2021 through a natural occurrences, being his death, cause COVID-19 or maybe something else. And Suluhu Hassan rises to power with the support of Kikwete, who is also a member of the Chama cha Mapinduzi. When this happens, there is a mindset that creates itself within the Tanzania Republic. It might have not been portrayed internationally, but it was an instant reaction of the citizens. Now remember, there are only two African states that were not colonized. One is Liberia, another is Ethiopia. And it is this Liberia that was not colonized that has given Africa its first female president. The Tanzanian people are yet to catch up with the whole idea of democracy and human rights that even Kenya, as a state adjacent to them, is trying to grapple with, but is a few steps ahead of them. And so the whole idea of having a female leader is something that is really new in that area. Distinguish this very differently with the opinion of the civic lens. We believe very well that leadership is a place of capacity, and any gender capable can lead. But we are detailing to you the scenario within the highest population of the Tanzanian officials, or the Tanzanian citizens, pardon me. So within Tanzania, the idea of a female president is still very new. They hope that after 4 years, they see how she leads, and if the ballot comes after those 4 years, they get to make their decision yet again. That's one. Another thing is they do not really anticipate how Tanzania is going to go on, because they are aware of what Chama cha Mapinduzi did in 2020 elections in subduing the opposition. So to put these voices to rest, Samia Suluhu Hassan invites all the members of the opposition to her inauguration and shows that she intends to follow the process of democracy and multipartyism of the space of Tanzania moving forward. So she's put to test for 4 years. The result is that after the 4 years, she has actually done the opposite of what the Tanzanian people hoped. She has now put to the end the united opposition. Individuals like Tundu Lissu, who had to come from abroad hoping that Tanzania was a new environment for political thriving, now finds themselves in prison for charges as heavy as treason, which he denies. So this is the space that Suluhu takes over. She takes over or continues the space of the CCM that has existed there before. Now, the young people in Tanzania are witnessing what is going in Kenya. The young people in Tanzania might have not been there when Nyerere built the 3 sounding seeds that formed the foundation of the republic. The young people are living in a technological era where they can witness democracy across all spaces in the world, and the young people hope that Tanzania can stand to the standards that they are seeing from these other countries. So with the whole feeling of a female president that is not welcomed by this particular population, joined together with the actions that they have witnessed during this particular election, the country erupted. And the eruption got so bad that what Kenya witnessed in a period of over 3 months in the worst memory of the Kenyan country in their post-election violence in 2007 was witnessed in Tanzania in a period of 1 week. The death tolls of the post-election violence in Kenya from independent reporters is put around 1,500 thereabouts. The death tolls in Tanzania in a period of 1 week was put by Reuters at 1,000 plus for the ones that are not accounted for. So Tanzania is facing a particular age that is aware of the history of violence that has been in this country as early as the 1900s, and is aware of the subdued voices that existed in this country as a result of the merger of 1964. And with the growth of technology and the growth of democracy and the rise of the Gen Z revolution, Tanzania is in a wake of something that it has never witnessed before. This is the Civic Lens.